All right, let's get started. Thanks so much for coming. All right, one person excited. My name's Eric Chang. I'm head of immersive media at Oculus, and I'm here to talk about video in VR headsets and how specifically over the past year or so it's become possible to create very good looking video, fantastic looking video without that much effort in headset. And I'm actually looking for my clicker, which may not be here. All right. Clap like this. Anyone remember that? You can check the age of the audience. Maybe, okay, I see it. Someone getting it. Great. I just got promised a beer. Too bad I don't really drink. Okay. So before we talk about VR, specific video, I want to talk just very briefly about media in general. Media is a long path, and at any given point in time, there are forms of media that dominate. And I like to think of these dominant forms of media along this path as stopping points. And we've seen this trope numerous times. Every talk about media talks about how we started with cave paintings and storytelling around a fire. And these stopping points, like television or video, which is really where most of us are now, are pretty obvious because we're all used to them, and we're intimately familiar with all of these stopping points. But VR, which is the reason we're all here today, has the potential to fundamentally change these forms of media experiences. And so I want to talk about a possible future of the path, which includes stereoscopic immersive video, interactive VR video, and ultimately, if we all do our jobs, some form of holographic experiences. So right now, we are able to create stereoscopic immersive video, which is really what this talk is about. We're doing rudimentary interactive VR experiences. And we are also experimenting in the very early stages of what could ultimately become holographic experiences. So 360 video has been supported by big platforms for nearly 3 years. So we've all seen 360 video experiences that are groundbreaking, but we've also realized that there are some inherent challenges in 360 video that can make creating them very difficult. So on the technical side, stitching is hard, and especially when we're creating stereoscopic 360 video experiences, which basically requires computer vision to do well. So sophisticated post-processing is usually required to get results that look good. Also, quality is limited in headset. Headsets can only decode video at a limited resolution, and of course, all of the pixels are spread out not only in a complete sphere, but between two eyes. So in practice, this leads to low-resolution views, and there are some tricks that can be used to increase the amount of detail currently in the field of view, like foveation, but in practice, it's difficult to make this look good. So on the creative side, it's also challenging. So production's challenging because everything is in the shot, and nearly every high-quality production, of course, has a crew plus the equipment necessary to conduct the shoot, and 360 cameras see everything. So sets either need to be cleared of all production elements, or they need to be removed in post. So new storytelling techniques are also required. So we've had hundreds of years to think about how to develop storytelling techniques or how to tell stories in flat media, front-facing flat media. But we've really only had a few years to think about how that might work in full 360. And finally, 360 video productions require a lot of VFX work. So we've already talked about the problem of everything being in the shot. This is all related. So in addition, stitching artifacts in stereoscopic work are always present and need to be removed or manually fixed in post. So this is always one of the most resource-intensive parts of a 360 production. So a few months ago, I feel like all the stars aligned, and a bunch of factors made stereoscopic 180 video, Facebook calls this 3D-180, very easy to create. So here's some footage of a sloth scientist friend. We're 80 feet up in a tree in Panama, and it looks really fantastic in headset. So I don't want you to believe me, because there's a lot of theoretical discussion about VR, and I find a lot of it, to me, not very useful. I want people to actually look at this in headset. So I found that it's impossible to talk about VR, the quality of VR content, theoretically. And so I'd like to invite everyone here to actually look at this content in headset. So I have a demo reel. It's about 2.5 minutes long. Most of the content was shot, edited, and distributed in the same day with very little work in post. So there are Oculus team members standing in the back corner over there at those desks, there are 20 Oculus Go units. I want to invite you to just stand up at any time and queue up to see that. You can feel free to get up any time during the session, but I highly recommend going and looking at it if you haven't seen what video can look like in headset. Just please try not to clog the aisles. Also, now it looks like everyone's leaving. OK, so the hypothesis I'm going to present during this talk is that 3D-180 makes sense as a major stopping point in the path. And this is for a few reasons. One is that it looks fantastic, but also it requires much less effort to create at the same time. And so there are a few reasons this is true. The first is that no complex stitching is required. 3D-180 is sort of a revival of these old-school stereoscopic techniques, but merged with modern camera calibration benefits. Second is that the same number of video pixels that can be decoded are used in half the display area, so this results in a much sharper experience. And third is that these front-facing storytelling techniques that we've been developing over hundreds of years are all fundamentally compatible with 3D-180. So many creators are much more comfortable when they're creating content and they're not thinking about how to make these full 360 experiences work. And actually, the thing that has made me most excited is that when I show content in 3D-180, people come out of headset talking about the content. They're not talking about anything technical. Usually, the content has had some effect on them. And really, I think we're all trying to remove this barrier between our display technology and the content itself. OK, so I spoke previously about stars aligning. The creator ecosystem for 3D-180, this leverages a lot of the industry work that was done and continues to be done for 360, is here, or it's almost here. There are a handful of consumer cameras that are either out now or will be out very soon that are around $400. This is the Zcam K1 Pro. This is a professional or prosumer camera that is closer to around $3,000. And this is the camera that I use to shoot what we're going to do later on in this session. The spatial audio, spatial audio is an extremely important part of VR experiences. And unfortunately for folks who have video backgrounds, it's often thought of last. Spatial audio is becoming more and more supported by recording devices, and the entry-level ambisonic recorders start at around $200, so it's pretty accessible. And because 3D-180 cameras record in standard video formats, Adobe Premiere Pro or any video editing program can be used to create 3D-180 experiences. Premiere Pro has supported 360 and immersive media for quite some time. But 3D-180 support in particular was announced recently. And later in this session, we'll be working using a technology preview release of Premiere Pro that has direct support for 3D-180. Editing spatial audio is a bit more complicated, but it's also becoming easier. Facebook's Spatial Workstation is a free suite of spatial audio plugins available to be used in any supported digital audio workstation software, and we'll also be using this later on in the session. So how easy is 3D-180 to shoot? Well, this is the behind-the-scenes shot of me up in a tree, taking that shot that you'll see in headset over there. My normal bag consists of this Zcam K1 Pro, an ambisonic recorder, sometimes a panel light. And all of this fits in a small bag, and it's in fact so small that as a single-person production team, I was able to haul it 80 feet up in the tree and strap it to that, strap the tripod to the tree. So it's very accessible for small production teams. And of course, consumer cameras are also starting to come out, and they're even easier to transport. So we've gotten a glimpse of why 3D-180 is a sweet spot in immersive media for VR headsets. I'd like to spend the rest of this session actually going through the content creation workflow. So here's the workflow we're going to go through today. So it's pretty standard. It's shoot, edit, create spatial audio, encode, and distribute. So I was originally, when I was planning this talk, I had planned on shooting an Acrobat here on stage. But instead, I've been shooting this afternoon, so you might have seen me running around with this exact setup. So I captured some footage on the floor at OC5, starting from when people came out of the keynote. And I spent about an hour doing some pre-processing, so you don't have to watch me copy files to the computer. There's a desktop machine behind this podium, to be totally transparent. It's a mid-spec machine. It's a 6-core i7, and it has a GTX 1080 Ti. And this is the workflow we're going to go through. So I've already ingested the media. so we'll stitch some of the footage. It's not really stitching, but that's what we're going to call it here. We'll arrange and edit the sequence. We'll do a very quick color grade, and then we'll export the master video. So let me log in, and then we'll switch to my computer. OK, so if we can switch to my computer. This is not much screen real estate. I have it at 1920 with fonts big. OK, so here are the assets I pulled in. So I used this Zcam camera that you can see here, and these are all the clips I've shot. So each one consists of a left eye and a right eye. OK, you can start. And what we're going to do first is show you that stitching process. So the Zcam ships with a program called WonderStitch. All of the cameras have some kind of OEM stitcher that come with them that allow you to process the video. So I've browsed that file that you just, those two files you've just seen, camera A and B. And I have a start frame and an end frame. And this is the important part. So here we go. So I'm going to stitch it at 2880. That's 5760 by 2880. So we're going to attempt to edit 5.7K video here live, which is something no one, I don't think anyone wants to do, but I'm going to do. And the output type is equirectangular. We'll talk about this a little bit later. And I'm just going to make sure it's going to the right place. We'll put it in the stitched folder here, and then we'll hit start. So it's, I don't know, I think it's like 30 seconds of footage or so. You'll see how fast it runs. This is a GPU-based process, and you can see it's pretty fast. It's close to real time. If I were stitching to 4K, it's roughly twice as fast as this. So we'll just wait in awkward silence while this finishes. But actually, I'll show you what else I did in the preprocessing step, which is actually, I need to open this project. OK, so this is the project that I did during preprocessing. So these steps that I'm going through now are actually what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to make sure the audio hardware is set to speakers. OK, great. So what I've done is stitch all of the clips except this one clip that you're seeing now, which is almost done. Right, so there we are. So here's the combined clip. I'm going to make a new folder for it. And I'm just going to put it in there. OK, and then I'll import this folder into Premiere Pro by dragging it in here. OK, and so there's already a folder here. This has the audio from that recording. So the other thing I've been doing while I've been recording is making sure I'm shooting spatial audio. So this is a Zoom H2N. It's about $200, maybe sometimes a little less. And so I shot that for every single clip I took. This clip, since there are people talking, actually also has, I'm using an iPhone, super high-end recording device. And one of the, actually I think Yelena here on her left is holding the iPhone and recording a voice clip. So this is really a stand-in for a shotgun mic or a lab mic, just to show that there's some kind of voice recording that's coming in. OK, so this is the combined footage. It's been stitched into OK, you can start. This side-by-side equirectangular format. Now, I've done the same thing for all of these clips. OK, so I didn't want to subject you guys to that. OK, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have three files here. One's the video file, and I have 2 audio files. So I'm going to make a new sequence, and I'm going to line those up. OK, so I'm going to call this 256. And one thing to note here, because we're using this technology preview, is that if I right-click on the video file and do interpret footage and scroll down, you'll see this VR properties area, and it says equirectangular projection, stereoscopic side-by-side, horizontal captured viewed 180, and vertical 180. So it's reading the metadata from WonderStitch and has chosen the right kind of projection. And this is one of the main benefits of this technology preview, because it allows us to do things like this. I can click on toggle VR video display, and in that tiny little window, which is because of this monitor, I can look around to see what it might look like in headset. And you can change the field of view in Premiere Pro to simulate the headset you want. If I actually had a Rift attached, I could put the Rift on and go and see it in stereoscopic preview in real time, which is what I usually have. I just don't have that on stage here. So that's super important. Now this sequence here has the same settings. So you can see equirectangular 180 by 180, 5.7K. Okay, so we're going to drag that video file in. There's a spatial audio track as well. We're going to drag that in, and you'll see that it's got 4 channels, which is first order Ambionics, which is what that records. I'm also going to drag this iPhone voice file in. Okay, so this is how I'm lined it up, and then I'm going to select it all, and I'm going to synchronize it. Okay, so I've it's been clapped, so it's synchronized, but if you zoom in, you can see that all the audio has been synchronized. So this is how I tend to work. There's probably a million ways to do this, but I tend to make subsequences that have all of the audio stacked and synchronized, because I don't want to do that in a sequence later. Okay, so I've done this step that you see here for all of those clips that I've imported. And it was a mad rush, but all of it took about an hour, and it was literally right before this session. So this is Yelena and Isabel introducing us. Okay, so you can see that for each one of these things, I shot, for example, tennis scramble. There's a little digital slate I've been using. I shot people playing super hot. These are all in the demo area, and they're super fun. I went up in the loft area, the press area, and I shot looking straight down, so you can see this view from above. And a few more things like the void and dead and buried. So we're going to take some of this footage, and we're going to cut it into a sequence, and then I'll take you through the process of exporting it, but also creating spatial audio. This is scary for those of us in video. First of all, how many of you have worked in spatial audio in the audience? Okay, so it's maybe like 5% or so. I think that's pretty typical. Spatial audio is something that makes a huge difference in VR experiences, but historically has required dedicated sound people to do. I think it's achievable now for normal folks who are used to normal. I shouldn't say that. There are spatial audio people in the audience. Okay, so we will make our sequence here. Okay, so I'm going to make a new sequence. I'll go a little bit more in detail here. I have a preset that I've made, but the settings are that it's 5.7K, so it's 5760 by 2880. And the important stuff is that in the VR video tab, it's set for side-by-side 180 video, 3D-180. And also what's important is in the audio tracks, we have 4 channel tracks that are set to multi-channel audio and adaptive track type. So these are in the presets that ship with Premiere Pro, so there are some VR-specific presets. But I'm going to call this OC5. Okay. Wow, that Windows sound is... I've heard it at ATMs, and it always scares me when I hear that. Okay, so here's this sequence. I went through and looked at a few of these, and I marked some of them as good. And the process here is that we're going to look at each one in the source monitor. We're not going to look at all of them, because I've already looked at some. Okay, I clapped it. So, okay, so let's see. We need speed here. So I'm going to set an in point.
Welcome to. Why didn't we practice it this whole time?
That goes for an outtake. Okay, let's keep going.
Can we do what? Like,
Yeah,
what are we actually doing?
Okay, so that's supposed to be an outtake, but I'm actually going to use that
Can we do?
as the real thing. So I've set in and out points, and now if I drag the sequence over into our OC5 sequence, it carries over with all of the audio clips lined up, which is super cool. So since I've already gone through and identified the clips I want to use, including this one. Now this is a clip that's running at 16x. So some of you walking out of the keynote might have seen me standing there with a camera. I rendered it out and took about 3 minutes, but instead of taking 3 minutes of your time, I'd use 3 minutes of my time. So I'm going to put that in, and this is some people playing tennis scramble right here. Okay, so we have someone playing vigorously and then celebrating.
The mate posting on the camera.
Okay, so we have that clip. We'll include that clip here. And just a couple more. So this is that loft view, which is a view from the top here. And again, this is all 5.7K footage. Okay, and then these 2 shots of VR League. So when I double click on them, they open in the program window because they're sequences. So I drag them up here and set in and out points here. So this is You'll see all this if you haven't had a chance to go into the demo area, and then a shot of the main playing area. So I'll add those here. And our final video is going to be about a minute. OK, great. So we've made a sequence here, and I should be able to play it back. So 5.7K video on a Windows machine is very hard to play back, which is too bad. OK, so this is our clip. So we're going to do a few more things here. I have a logo, and it looks like this. OK, so this is the OC5 logo you've been seeing everywhere. What I want to do is overlay that logo into this first clip here. So you'll see what happens if I drag this here into the timeline. Here, we'll put it right here. And you look, it's a giant PNG file. So we're going to use something in the effects panel they're called immersive effects. I'll show you them here, right here. Immersive video. So these are all VR effects that are designed to be used formerly in 360, but now in the technology preview, it's unlocked things like applying effects to side by side and to fields of view less than 360. So I'm going to use one called plane to sphere, and I'm going to drag that on here. And you'll see that it's automatically it's recognized that right here that I'm working, because auto VR properties is checked, it's recognizing that I'm working in side-by-side 180. If I uncheck this, you can verify side-by-side 180 by 180, which is very cool. And now we have all this control, like we can change the scale, and if we use this VR video display, we can see where it's going to live in the final projection, and we can, in fact, move it around. So I'll move it over to the right of Yelena here. And one thing that's very hard to preview without a headset is stereoscopic video, which is what we're working on. The stereo disparity slider here lets you move the piece around, the projection around forward and back. So I'm going to eyeball it, famous last words. I'm going to set it. OK, so in theory, this should be right in front of Yelena. If you are used to side-by-side content, you can see how it lines up with her shoulders. It should work. So that's going to be our logo, and it's going to appear here and then disappear here. OK, so and then I'm going to just add a couple effects to make this watchable. So one of the things that is very common, of course, in normal video are transitions. And you see crossfades are very common, probably the most common thing. Crossfades in stereoscopic content just do not work very well, because you can have an object fading in the middle of another object. It might work in some aspects. You have to watch it in headset. But I'm going to use a dip to black. This is a lot of people have been calling this a blink, and I'll show you why in our industry. So if I play this, it just dips to black and it comes back. So this is a very watchable transition in VR. So I'm going to put a couple of these in. A lot of this is about creative taste, which we don't have time to think about in a live session. And so I'm just going to use these. So I'm going to put a dissolve in the front and the back of this logo that we put in, and we'll have a nice fade, maybe a 2-second fade in the end to black. OK, so we're getting pretty close to something that I will export, and we'll actually be able to watch it in headset before the session's over. Now, the other thing I want to do, you'll see that, I don't know if you can see this, but there are lenses here. So the left eye can see the right lens, and the right eye can see the left lens. That's because we're working, well, those lenses are actually 220-degree lenses. But even when we export out to 180, you can see the lenses because they're right here on the side. So that can be really distracting, because one eye can see, it's like you can see your nose. Some people can see your noses. It's harder for Asians. So I have this clip here, this lens mask, which I'm going to drop on top. And it actually is just designed to block out the left and right sides of both left and right eye. So this is a way to eliminate that lens from the view. And I think the last thing we'll do here is drop in an audio a soundtrack. So we'll add a track. Let's see, let's add one standard audio track. Okay, so I can't see it. There it is. Okay, so I have a music track, and I'm just going to drop it in the timeline after these antics in the beginning.
Why don't we practice it this whole time?
Okay, so we'll put it here, and maybe we'll fade it out in the end so it feels good. Okay, so this is what it's going to sound like. We're going to hit play.
Welcome to Why don't we practice it this whole time?
That goes for an outtake. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so we have a soundtrack. So this is our sequence. I think I'm pretty happy with it for something we spent 10 minutes on. And now I'm going to export it. Okay, so we'll go to File, Export, Media, and I'm going to export it as something that I can publish to the web. And I'll talk about all the distribution destinations pretty soon. Let's see, I have these presets I've set up. Presets here, I'll show you what they do. Here we go. Okay, so I'm exporting at 3840 by 1920, so that's like 4K UHD. And at the bottom here, you'll see video is VR is checked, and it's pulled in stereoscopic side by side, and also 180 degrees for both horizontal and vertical field of view. So it's going to insert the right metadata, which works right now everywhere, which is awesome. For audio, there's also a magic audio is Ambionics checkbox. This inserts some Abesh's in the back. If you're the 10 audio people in here, you should go find Abesh and talk to him later. No, but I'm joking. But it's fantastic that this exists, because it means that the thing that we export out of here can be played with spatial audio on almost every platform. Before I do this, I'm going to cancel out because I forgot to mute some tracks. So I only have one ambisonic track. I'm going to mute these before I do my export, just so that we have something that works in the export. So I'll choose this again. And we'll place it in a new folder called Exports. We'll call it Masters. Okay, and we'll call this OC5 4K Master. Okay, and we'll queue that up. Now I'm going to add a couple more things, and I'll tell you why it's for later. One of them's for spatial audio, so I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to export actually a 360 a mono 360 version. And this is for the spatial audio step, which will make sense in a minute. So what I'm going to do is set the crop, so it's only taking the left eye, and then in the output I'm scaling it to fit. So this is actually the front 180 degrees of a monoscopic 360 video, and I'm going to export it as a DNX HD. This is just so it plays back easily. And it says horizontal field of view 360, it's monoscopic. Okay, so we'll put that in the same place, and we'll call it OC5 proxy 360. And just because I'm going to multitask and do a couple things in the background, I'm going into unrehearsed territory, so this is always exciting. I want to export something higher than 4K, because something that happened a couple weeks ago is that Oculus Go was unlocked, the decoder was unlocked, it can play 5.7K video now. And that's actually the video you're watching in headset back there is 5.2K. And for 3D-180, that theoretically saturates display resolution. So this is the first time we've been able to saturate display resolution with video that's very, very immersive, wide field of view. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is export a 5120 by 2560. This is the same resolution you're watching in the back. Okay, so I'm going to export this as H.264, and we'll put it here. So we'll call it OC5 5K master. Okay, great. These are all queued up, so I'm going to play them. Start encoding. Okay, so can we go back to the slides for a minute? Okay, so one thing actually I got to go back. I gave you a little preview. So I should have talked about this before, but 3D-180 versus VR-180. A lot of folks here have probably heard about YouTube supporting VR-180. I want to talk about the difference between them. So 3D-180, I think of as being the de facto industry standard for editing, because it uses cropped equirectangular projection. This is just like stereoscopic 360 video, except that each eye is cut in half. And in this case, we're working in side-by-side format. Now, this is a normalized format, and that means that it's camera agnostic. So you can mix and match footage in the editor without thinking about what camera was used to capture it. VR-180 is different. So VR-180 is YouTube's format. It consists of the native fisheye projection from each one of these lenses. And it also has embedded calibration metadata. And this metadata is used during playback to de-warp the images, also during editing for any editors that might support it. So what that means is each clip in VR-180 is tied to its calibration metadata. And this can make editing more challenging, but it makes sharing very easy. And it also reduces generational quality loss if you have to do a bunch of encodes, for example. So Facebook and Oculus support 3D-180, and that's the format we're going to work in today. So this is a clip in VR-180 and 3D-180. So interesting, like when I went through WonderStitch, you saw those two options that both said VR-180. VR-180 Ecorrect is what we call 3D-180 on our side, and then VR-180 Mesh is the VR-180 that YouTube supports. So I want to talk about spatial audio. The videos that we're exporting out of Premiere Pro right now can be uploaded to Facebook. They can be played back directly in Oculus headsets with spatial audio. So they're fully functional as clips that can be played back. Of course, they don't include the other audio files that you saw stacked in the sequence. And so I want to take you through a very basic spatial audio editing workflow. I'm pretty new to spatial audio. Actually, Abesh in the back has given me a couple crash courses. But I found it to be pretty easy to pick up with a little bit of attention. And audio work happens in a digital audio workstation, or DAW, or DAW. I actually don't know whether it's DAW or DAW, and it appears that no one else does either. And so the spatial workstation is a free set of plugins that work as part of a DAW. I'm more familiar with the video workflows, so I'm going to start with a video project. I'm going to convert that sequence export into a DAW project, and then we're going to work in the DAW for that edit. OK, so maybe we can go back to the computer, and I'll set that up. OK, this is going to run in the background for a little bit, so the computer might get a little slower. So I'm in my sequence here, my OC5 sequence, and I'm going to go to File, Export, Final Cut Pro XML. OK, so this is the XML file that we're going to use to convert into a DAW project. And I think multitasking. Remember when I said I went off script? Now we're paying for it. OK. OK, so we'll go to the desktop, OC5, and there's a folder called Spatial Audio. It's empty, and I'm going to export this XML file into there. OK. I think it's done. Let me go back to this media encoder thing. What is it doing? OK, here we go. OK, yeah, see, it's doing the 5K version, which I think I'm going to pause. We'll finish that later. Oh, it pauses all of it. OK, I'm learning things. I'll cancel that one. OK. How do I cancel that one? Look, so Brian Williams, luckily, is here in the front. I might. Oh, look, it's done. OK, it's done. So now I can pause it. OK. All right. OK, good. So we've exported that XML file. This is WonderStitch in the background. So let's take a look at that. Spatial audio. OK, here's this XML. So there's a program that I'm going to use that's called Bordio. This is a converter from that Final Cut XML format into Reaper. And Reaper is the digital audio station that we're going to use today. OK, so if I browse to that XML file, and I'm going to output in that same folder, and this search folder, these are all the assets that it's going to look for when it's doing the conversion. And so what it's going to do is convert to a Reaper project, and it's also going to take all of the assets that I've used and extract audio files from the ones that it can't read natively in Reaper. So it's doing that one by one. These are some other formats that it supports. So now that I've done that, I have a Reaper project which I can open. And this is the sort of thing that strikes fear into an audio editor's hearts, because we have no idea what this stuff means. But here are all the these are all the audio tracks that came out. And just so I don't get confused, I'm going to name them. So this is the iPhone voice track. This is a stereo track. This looks like it's the camera audio. And this 4-channel thing here is from the Zoom H2N spatial audio file. And then here's the music track. OK, so the way this DAW works is that I think of these as a series of nodes, and you send the signal from one to the other through this thing called routing. So I'm going to follow the script that I have here from Abesh that was super useful for making this work, and show you how this works. So here, for routing, we're going to basically tell every track that it has 16 channels, and then we're going to route it to a master track. So this just takes a minute. I'll do it really quickly, and then we'll continue. OK, so camera audio, I'm actually going to mute and just ignore, because we're not interested in it. And I'm actually going to, OK, we'll do this in a second. OK, so the spatial audio track here, also track channel 16, we're going to send it to 3D master and send all 16 channels. And then from the 3D master, we're going to send this to the control track. And this will all make sense in a minute. And if it doesn't, you have to go through a tutorial again, which is what I had to do the first time I did it. OK, so this is great. So now we're going to add the spatializer plugins. So you'll see these are the Facebook 360 plugins for Reaper. And I'm going to add a spatializer plugin. And you'll see that you can tell it what kind of input you're expecting. This is a mono track from that iPhone recording, so I'm going to use the left track. And this is interesting. So remember that proxy that I exported? The 360 proxy. So if I go select it here, and I'll tell it it's a monoscopic file. If I load it, it will give me a view into there. This can be tracked by headset as well, but if you can look around here. And I can actually place that audio track wherever I want in the scene, which is super cool. And there's even support for rudimentary tracking, so you can peg this to someone's face and have it track them as they walk around. So this is very, very powerful. I'll show you what this does in a minute, the player. OK, so we've done that. And then for our spatial audio track, we're going to do the same thing. We will add a spatializer plugin or effects here, and we'll say it's B format, first order Ambionics. This is the format that Zoom recorder records to. OK, so now we have a spatial audio track feeding into 3D master. We have that iPhone mono track feeding into 3D master. And then in our control here, we'll add the control plugin. OK, and that's the minimum required to make this work. OK, so I'm going to do just one more thing. I'm going to add a mix loudness plugin. This allows us to see how loud this is going to be. So for now, I'm going to mute the music track, and I'm going to mute the camera audio track. And if we play it,
Welcome to Oops. Why don't we practice it?
It's really loud. So I'm going to turn some of this stuff down. And if we had more time, we could make this perfect.
Welcome to Oops. Why don't we practice it?
We don't have more time, so I'm not going to make it perfect. OK, so this is important, though. This is super interesting. So I'm going to mute the spatial audio track and play this again. Remember, we have pegged this audio track to the center of these two co-workers here, Elena and Isabel. I'll hit play.
Welcome to Oops. Why don't we practice it this whole time?
You hear it moving?
That goes for an outtake. OK, let's keep going.
Can we do?
OK, and now you'll notice that if I stop it and play it again.
Welcome to Oops. Why don't we practice it this whole time?
That goes for an outtake.
Or VR headset, this should sound like it's coming from them, from these two girls in the scene. So I found this to be really easy and surprisingly like fun to go through. And so we basically have spatialized the audio and placed it right where we want it to be. So that's very useful. OK, now the last thing I want to do here in this project is deal with the music track. And the reason I'm leaving this to the end is that it can be complicated. And the reason it's complicated is we have spatial audio, and spatial audio wants everything to be spatialized. And if you want something like a music track or a voiceover narration track, typically you want that not to be spatialized, right? You want it just to play no matter what direction you're looking. You want it to sound like it's playing in stereo or in mono. And audio formats support this. So Facebook has an encoder, which I'll show you in a minute. There's actually a field for headlocked audio, and you would export a second track. So you'd have a spatial audio track, a headlocked audio track, and the encoder would encode that all into one file, and Facebook and Oculus both support that. Now, YouTube also supports this in a different format. They take 4-channel ambisonic, and they say, well, if you give us channels 5 and 6, we'll make that headlocked. So we don't have an encoder for that. I don't know what. You have to do that yourself, I think. But the goal here is actually we're going to upload to the open web. So we'll have, at the end of this session, if you go to a website using any WebVR-enabled browser or an Oculus Go, it will take over and play in stereoscopic 180. So that supports first-order ambisonics, no headlocked audio track. So I'm going to cheat a little. I'm going to take that music track, and I'm going to funnel it into the first channel of the audio. The first channel is a mono track. It functions as a mono track. And so it's going to sound like it's headlocked, although it won't sound that good, but it'll work. OK, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to send this to the 3D master, as I would normally. And I'm going to send both tracks, right, 1 and 2, because it's stereo. And I'm going to send it to both channels, the first channel of the 3D master. Okay, so the music track is now being funneled only to that first channel. And if we play the content here, let me bring that video back up so we can. Let's see. I think it's actually gone. All right. Okay, well, I'll just play it and you'll see it.
Why don't we practice it this whole time?
That goes for an outtake.
Muted. Here we go.
Why don't we practice it this whole time?
That goes for an outtake. Okay, let's keep going.
OK, so that should sound like it's coming from both speakers, because it will come out like a mono track. OK, so now I'm going to export it, and we're going to mix it into our final video and then upload it, and you can all watch it in headset. OK, so I'm going to go to File, Render. I'm going to render just the control track. Oh, actually. Sorry, one thing to do. At the bottom here, it says Decode Binaural in the control track. This is so we can preview it in headset. So if you're wearing stereo headphones, which are the kind that almost most of us wear, it will let us preview the spatial audio. If I uncheck this, it will no longer decode it to binaural, and I'll be able to render out the entire ambisonic mix. OK, so I'm going to select the whole track, and then export it to. Why are there different file pickers in every app? OK, exports, masters, and we'll call it OC5, third order ambisonics, right? That's 16 channels, and 16 channels here, and render. OK, so. OK. And I'm going to render one more thing here. I'm going to check Decode Binaural. I'm going to render a binaural track. Just so we have something that works in normal headphones. And so we'll call it OC5 binaural stereo, and we'll say that it's stereo. We'll render it out. Like normally, I think you would be checking levels and all this stuff to make sure it's perfect. Again, if we had the time. So now we have a bunch of these master files. We have 4K, and we don't have a 5K version, but I'll do that later. So we have a 4K version of this video, and we have binaural and third order ambisonics tracks. So can we go back to the slides for a second? So this is what we're going to use. Actually, maybe we'll just do it live. Go back to the computer. I'm going to run Facebook 360 encoder. If we can get back to that computer feed. Is that working? OK, great. So this is Facebook 360 Encoder. This comes as part of Facebook's Spatial Workstation. And you'll see it outputs in a bunch of different formats. There's Facebook 360, Facebook 180, YouTube video, Rift. You can do audio conversions. And there's this experimental MKV down here. I'm going to export to YouTube video because that's it's just standard. It'll copy the video over, and it will do first-order ambisonics, which YouTube supports. Also, the open web supports this, which is what we're going to target. The source is B format third-order ambisonics, so we'll drag this third-order ambisonics file in. You notice headlocked audio is grayed out. We currently don't support this for YouTube. But if we were exporting to Facebook, it would unlock. You could drag a headlocked audio track in here. So luckily, our third-order ambisonics already has that music track built in. Left-right stereoscopic, we'll drag a video in. And then we hit encode and browse to where we want it to go. Call it distribution, OC5, 180, 3D. OK. So now it's going to compress the audio, and it's going to mux the video and audio files into a single file that is ready for distribution. It doesn't take very long. So one more thing I want to do is make a binaural version, make a stereo version. And the reason I want to do this is that a lot of players don't support ambisonics. A notable example is the iPhone in Safari doesn't support ambisonics when you're playing it from the web. So we need a version that only has stereo audio. Unfortunately, this means now we're going into the command line, which everyone loves. This is a developer conference, right? So exports, masters. So what I'm going to do is make sure these file names line up. But this is an FFmpeg command, and all it does is say copy the video from one file and copy the audio from another file and jam it into a new file. I think that's the technical jargon for it. So here we go. OK, so it should be really fast. All right, great. Someone please make a good muxing tool for us so we don't have to do that ever again. OK, so now we have a binaural version and we have an ambisonics version. I'm going to upload this to my website, and it will be available in the browsers, in Oculus browser in Go in the back. So this, in theory, should be impossible. In theory, should not be working. Is my internet plugged in? Oh, I don't have a Ethernet thing here. Let's see. Is there a network cable back here? Folks in the back? There it is. Great. OK. All right, the lights are on. OK, so I'm going to upload it to two places. One is my website. The second place is to Amazon S3, so I don't have to try to serve it all from the website. So we'll go to videos, OC5. These are the versions that I used for testing. I'll drag these here. And I'm also going to upload it to a website. Now, I'm uploading it to a web host that's literally $7 a month. This is a WordPress site that I use for testing this kind of content. So here are those two video files from, it's different content for testing. So I will drag these here. And then the last thing I need to do here is make sure my permissions are set for all users. OK, great. So this is uploading. So what we've done now is we've distributed content. So we made content and encoded it and uploaded it to the web. This is a live link, so it's available now in the world. But more interesting for you, it's available in those 20 Go units in the back. So let's see. I think, can we go to the slides? Because I want to talk about encoding a little bit, distribution destinations. So we've encoded very specifically for the open web. And that's on the right-hand side, you see MP4, first-order ambisonics. So this works on YouTube. It works It works on Oculus headsets. It works if you upload it to Facebook. And you'll see some other formats here. So Facebook supports 4K H.264 video in MP4 containers and Facebook Audio 360. So those Facebook options in the Facebook 360 encoder, those will output audio that Facebook likes, and it's a hybrid second-order format that supports things like headlocked audio. Now, Oculus can play back all of that, and the Oculus column here has, you'll see 5760 by 2880. So this is as of OS version 3.47, and it's out in the wild. And it's very high resolution. So it's fantastic that we have high-res playback. Now, what's great is Adobe also, in their encoder, has unlocked higher than 4K encode. And you remember before it was capped at 4K. We had to go back to the command line to use FFmpeg. You can just, in fact, you saw us do that in Media Encoder. We're outputting 5120 by 2560. So those formats in Oculus are for side-loading, playing locally. They're for third-party playback in developer apps, like out of Unity and things like that. These are some popular distribution destinations. So Facebook 360, this is an app in the Oculus ecosystem. It's an experience that pulls in media from your feed. It's both immersive and rectilinear. And so if you see 360 or 180 content in your feed while you're browsing Facebook, you can save that post. And when you if you launch Facebook 360, that video will show up in the Your Videos section. In Oculus, we have Oculus Video, and we have Gallery. So this will play back. Oculus Video is a curated collection of 360 and 180 video content. And Gallery is designed for side-loaded playback, local playback, and also playback from media servers. So if you have a standard media server on your network at home, like a NAS box or I don't know, something running on your computer, your Go will see all of those media devices if you run Gallery, and you can stream directly from media devices. And of course, there are many third-party aggregators that host 360 and 180 content. Some of these are curated, and others are community, UGC content. Game engine VR. So if basic video playback isn't enough, you can build these bespoke VR experiences. You can add things like interactivity or social co-presence, anything that isn't supported by the normal video players. This is also a way to get your immersive video onto the Oculus Store. And finally, you can distribute onto the open web using WebVR or React VR. This is what we're doing today, right now. These videos are played back in WebVR compatible browsers like Oculus Browser in Go. Also, versions of Firefox or Chromium do this on computers and should support tethered headsets. So let's go back. Actually, we don't need to go to the computer, I'm sorry. I think we're ready to view this content in Go. So I'm going to ask, let's see. OK, I think we're ready in the back. So just a summary of what we've done. We shot all the footage today. So I started shooting at noon. I spent about an hour doing stitching and pre-processing before getting up on stage. We've done editing in 3D-180, added a music track. We've incorporated spatial audio and a mono voice track using an iPhone. And you can see the video now at echengvr.com. That's a test site I have, /OC5. The Go units in the back have this already bookmarked, so you can check it out. Now, just note that the difference between the side-loaded content you saw before and this is dramatic, because we're now streaming 4K video from the web. It's highly compressed, while you were watching 5K video side-loaded locally with basically unlimited bandwidth before. So what I'm going to do is I will render out, actually it's already done, so I'll upload the 5K version and I'll link it from this same URL. So if you are interested, you can hop into your Oculus Go and browse to this URL. You can click on that link and it will download it, and you can view it in Gallery right there on your Go. So you can see the difference. The only other thing I want to say is that it is really dark in the demo hall, so I'm shooting very high ISO. So it will look noisy, but I think anyone who makes content will understand what happens when it's dark for video cameras. But in stereo, it can affect how that stereo works. OK, so we're going to do live viewing. Get up at any time and go check it out, and we'll open the floor for a Q&A. There are 2 mics, one on either aisle.